How you guys doing today? My name is Anthony, host of Tier Talk, and today I want to discuss solitary confinement. Is there a need for solitary confinement? Yes, there is. Again, if you're not familiar, the show is Tier Talk. We talk about things that are happening in corrections, what's trending. And today, my topic is going to be solitary confinement. My name is Anthony Gangi, and you can follow us on multiple venues, including iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, and YouTube. Guys, got to follow me on that YouTube channel and like the page on Facebook. It's over 24,000 followers. And I also have an app that you can download for free. Now, the reason why I want to bring up solitary confinement, it could also be called administrative segregation, restrictive housing, however you want to define it. The purpose is still the same. It's to take someone who is problematic. Yes, guys, now listen to what I'm saying here. It's to take someone who's problematic, remove them from, let's say, general population, and place them in an area where, guess what, guys? They still get programming. They still get mental health services, medical services, education. They still get their needs met. But it's done in a manner that's more safe and secured, so we can go back to general population and focus on the many who are also getting out. You know, when we have talks about solitary confinement, again, interchangeable between administrative segregation or restrictive housing, I'm just going to use the word solitary confinement because that's how it's defined right now. That's what people call it. But by the way, they're not alone. There's interactions. In some cases, solitary confinement could be two inmates in the same cell. It's just the fact that they're being removed from general population and put into a more secured housing area, and they're not forgotten. I'm going to emphasize that. They're not forgotten. They're not pissing in buckets, and they're not in the dark, if you will. And if that is the case, then we need to fix that on a specific level. And by fixing that, I mean fixing that, not eliminating it. Fixing it, not eliminating it. Remember that. Okay, I said it twice. Fixing it, not eliminating it. Okay, so having said that, in corrections, we got to worry about the many. Right now, sometimes the public will be more focused on the one based on an extreme, and then we got to focus on the many. There's a conflict there because while you're focused on the one and you want to make all these changes for the one, it then may conflict with the many. And in this case here, the elimination of a tool, and I'm going to call it a tool for solitary confinement. The elimination of that tool is an elimination of a great resource that correctional staff utilize to maintain a safe and secured facility. It is a tool. It is a resource. Okay. Now, bringing back, let's just to give some examples. First off, people automatically look at solitary confinement or, again, administrative segregation or restrictive housing as a means to punish. And I'm going to get back to that. But you also have to remember that some inmates prefer to be left alone. Some inmates like that solitude. Some inmates are put there for protective reasonings. You know, some inmates are put there because they choose to be there. Okay? So it's not like we just take inmates that we randomly want and put them back there. There are some inmates that choose that lifestyle, that rather be there, or some inmates that are afraid to be in GP. Also, I want to talk about the use of solitary confinement in the way it's employed today. Not the primitive notion of the way you think it was or the way you think it is. Because today, corrections has evolved and solitary confinement is still being utilized because there's no other alternative when it comes to maintaining a safe and secured facility. And yes, there is a punishment aspect to solitary confinement. Believe it or not, guys, punishment and rehabilitation coexist. You know, back in the day, it was strictly punishment. And today, it's more about rehabilitation superseding everything. And I'm sure later on down the line, people will say, hey, wait a second, it's rehabilitation and punishment. Exactly. So I'm telling you that right now, that rehabilitation and punishment coexist. So there is a form of solitary confinement that part of it is punishment. Part of it is the person did something wrong and that has to be corrected. But the other aspect, the other perspective is the rehabilitation aspect. That when they're there, they're being attended to. Their needs are being met. And we're able to do that so we can focus on them, give them the needs that they require, but also attend to the population. The rest of the population who's probably asking us to do something with that inmate. to remove the inmate that's messing up with their chances to get their GED, to get their program needs met. They got demons that they got to fight, and they're not able to program correctly when someone keeps stirring it up. And by removing that individual that's a threat or problematic, it helps us make an environment that's somewhat more conducive to rehabilitation and learning. Okay, so we have to remember the reasons why we're doing it. When you see these shows on multiple networks contesting the use of solitary confinement, but again, administrative segregation or restrictive housing, all can be used interchangeably, they're not telling you why the person was put in there. They hide that fact. And that's important, because if we knew why the person was put in there, then we would agree. Then the elimination of a tool or a resource like solitary confinement wouldn't be in question. Right now we have problems with the health bill, right? Correct? It's a repeal and then coming up with a new one. Well, solitary confinement's funny because people are trying to repeal it, get rid of the practice, but not replace it with anything. Because I believe they know deep down inside there isn't another alternative for a practice that has literally evolved with corrections, but evolved in a good way. This may sound weird to some people, but solitary confinement has become more humane, hence the change of terms, administrative segregation or restrictive housing. But when those terms were adopted, that's because the changes were meant to explain what's going on now as opposed to what happened yesterday. When someone, I want to talk about the punishment aspect of solitary confinement. When someone commits to a wrong inside the facility, things are going to be taken away from them. That's how we maintain control. You do something foolish, we take away the things that have value to you. That is the humane way of doing things. This way, the person that does something foolish has to earn that back. It used to be where those certain things were called privileges. Now they're called rights. And that makes it harder for us to maintain control, because the stuff that we were able to utilize as leverage, we can no longer utilize because it's now been pushed as rights and no longer privileges. The reason why we had it as privileges was because if someone committed to a wrong and we wanted to correct them, well, now you can no longer have, let's say, visits because you did something foolish. Now you can no longer have visits until you've earned that back by doing the right thing. But now when those things are considered rights, the person can keep on being foolish, knowing that there's not much we can do with them because what used to be a privilege is now a right, and I can still do this because these things will not be taken from me. And again, it makes it very harder for us to control because we lose out on the leverage that we need to maintain control inside the correctional facility. Okay? Plus, when someone does something foolish, again, talking about solitary confinement, the reason why we need to put them somewhere else, which I've mentioned before, is for the safety aspect. I got a little bit of a scenario I want to mention to you. If I have an inmate, and I want to give a perspective that's not just custody, because it seems like when we talk about custody or staff, no one seems to want to listen. But then when I give a perspective from an inmate's perspective, more people tend to listen. So let's say I have an inmate that's constantly problematic, constantly assaults every inmate they're housed with. Now, I remove that inmate once because he assaulted his cellmate, and maybe, hey, you know what, maybe it was just a personal beef between the two of them. Then I put him in another cell, and he assaults another cellmate. So I pull him out. What do I do with him now? Where can I put him? I have it on record now that he assaulted his last two inmates that he was roommate with. He assaulted two inmates that he last roommate with. So what do I do with him now? Where do I put him? Because now the funny thing is the people that are pushing to eliminate solitary confinement, they're going to be the same people that will push for the soon-to-be next roommate and say, well, you put this animal in there next to my son. next to my husband, and he assaulted him after you knew he just assaulted 2 other inmates. So there's the liability aspect of it all. Now that we know we've assaulted 2, getting ready to put him in with someone else, can't do it. Can't do it. It's liability. So what am I supposed to do with them? So again, it's like the healthcare, repeal, and replace. Replace with what? I think the reason why we still have the practice, even though it's slowly starting to eliminate, is because the people know that there's nothing to replace it with. There's nothing to replace it with that will help maintain the safe and secured environment that's needed inside a correctional facility, both for staff and inmates. So nobody wants to put their name on something that eliminates that practice, because they know deep down inside, when the facilities start to run amok and anarchy kicks in, nobody's going to want to have their name on something that eliminated a very important tool or resource. And that's key. And again, it's a practice that is done in a humane way. It's a practice that's meant to remove, and then the person earns their way back in. But as I mentioned, the practice has evolved, because the number one concern from society right now is that we don't want somebody coming out of that area onto the streets. And I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. We're looking to rehabilitate. And the last thing I want is a reflection of someone that we couldn't get to. Someone that just did not want to change. And then we release that person from solitary confinement to the environment, to outside, to the public, and it just doesn't look good on us, because believe it or not, we take pride in what we do. We take pride in all rehabilitative experts, all rehabilitative efforts. We take pride in that. Okay? Everybody from civilians to custody painting the canvas, and civilians doing what they got to do to make sure that the inmates have a different mindset than they did coming in, that they defeat the demons, and that they move forward. But remember, people have to want that change. You can't force somebody to change. You have to understand that. You guys could create so much positive movement on the outside, but if they're not receptive to it on the inside, and we don't have an environment to make that happen, all your effort doesn't matter. Because remember, we're making changes in facilities that really weren't meant for these type of rehabilitation efforts. It was meant just to strictly punishment. So just to strictly punish. So now we're making a very big collective effort here, from civilian staff to custody staff, to make it work. To make sure the needs are met of each individual inmate in there. And that whoever gets released to society, gets released to society with a better mindset. But they also have to be welcomed. That's another thing. They have to be welcomed by society, and they have to be given the opportunity to do the good things. Because mostly the people that fight for them on the outside, once they get released, they turn their backs on them. Where's the traditional services? That's something we have to work on. But in the meantime, we're trying to get people out there with a better mindset. And the last thing we want is for someone to max out from solitary, because some of us may take that as a failure on our end. We may look at that as, wow, couldn't save that one, and we may hold that personally. But then again, we may have somebody that just didn't want to change, and all our efforts, and we tried, were fruitless. You know, I know people question the mindset of someone that's in solitary. What can happen to them? Now, again, I tell you right now, all their needs are met. Medical, mental, education, drug treatment, social service needs. And people may question, literally, what are we really doing in those areas? That's what we're doing. We're giving them the programs that they require in those areas. But the incentive for the person to take those programs has to be correct. Has to be because they want to take the programs, because that's what will make them receptive. And as I said, we don't want them maxing out from there. We want them to kind of do the right thing and then max out from either GP or a full min unit, where we want them to progressively move forward and max out. But there are some that just cannot be managed. And if you ask the inmate population, they will turn around and they will tell you that person needed to be there. Because what the public seems to forget is the reasons why they were put there. In their effort to make changes and eliminate a valuable tool and resource like solitary confinement, restrictive housing, administrative segregation, whatever you want to call it, they neglect to mention why the person was put in there. So the question I pose to you is, if I have to rehabilitate the many and I have a constant threat in the environment, what do I do? Because I got to worry about the many that got to come out, not just the one. And if I got the people that are receptive to programming, and I got the one person that still needs some work, but he's messing up the people that are receptive, again, this person here is not forgotten, but they are going to get removed. So I could focus on the many who are receptive, who want the programming, who want to do something productive with their lives. See, the problem is we make these efforts to fix what you say is broken by taking extremes and using those extremes as a way to generalize the system. Like that one incident, wherever you want to say happened, let's say an incident happened in Texas that shouldn't have happened. All of a sudden becomes the norm. That generalizes the system across the board. Now when you go to make a change in a general manner, to not just that one specific issue, that one specific facility that had the issue, but now you want to change all facilities on a grand scale, it's going to backfire. You're not going to know about it, but Frontline's going to know about it, because they're going to be the ones that are getting assaulted every day, because you wanted to make it a change based on an extreme that literally should have only been affected that one area, the specifics of that one area. Right now, custody is getting hurt. Staff is getting hurt left and right. And both sides, even inmates. Inmates are getting assaulted left and right by other inmates. And you're eliminating the tool that custody and staff can use to protect not just staff. I'm not being just one-sided here, but the other inmates. You're eliminating a resource for them to keep the facility safe. You quickly want to get rid of it, but you're not putting anything in its place. You know, when you want to make changes into a system that's in the shadows and you know very little about, how do you not go to the front line and ask them, what is it that you need? Because you seem to be aware of what's going on because you live and breathe it. And if you want to go to the inmate, that's fine. Go to the inmates, ask them what they need. But don't just isolate what the inmate needs from what custody may say, because believe it or not, we need to coexist. We both want to go home safely. So why is only one party being heard and the other one being eliminated? No one's talking to staff, asking staff, what do you need? How can we make this better? Then even talking to inmates, what do we need to make this better? Than finding a way where we all can sit together at a table and be constructive, instead of working in isolation of each other. That's the problem. And then, as I said, I'm watching these shows now that go against solitary confinement, but they never mention why the person was put in there and why we utilize it. They never mention why we utilize it. They never mention why I'm calling it a tool. And during the time, it's been revamped. Inmates get more time out of their cell in some cases than GP, because that seems to be the focus of attention right now. But that's the evolution of corrections. You can't sit there and think that you know what's going on in corrections when you don't work it, when you don't live and breathe it. Corrections has evolved in a lot since the last 25, 30 years. Its evolution's been great. But right now, I feel that the changes that people are trying to implement are of a primitive version of what they feel corrections used to be. The punishment aspect. It's not about that anymore, guys. There's a rehabilitation aspect to it, too. The problem is that we're pushing more to rehabilitate, and we're using that to supersede the punishment or the safety and security aspect, because believe it or not, with punishment comes safety and security. They coexist. So again, where we're at now is strictly rehabilitation comes first. Punishment or safety and security comes second. Let's jump ahead. They coexist. Rehabilitation and punishment coexist. But again, it's safety and security that needs to trump everything. Safety and security needs to trump everything. It's what makes us able to do what we need to get done, the work that needs to get done. Without that effort of safety and security in mind, well, guess what? Rehabilitation doesn't exist. If we don't have a way to maintain a safe and secured environment inside our correctional facilities, there is no rehabilitation. It will not exist. In order for rehabilitation to occur, there have to be tools that custody can use to maintain an environment that's conducive to rehabilitation. And for those that are making efforts to push away the use of a tool, how do you not ask staff, why is that tool needed? How come no one ever asks us that? How come no one ever asks why that inmate was put into that area to begin with? How come we're automatically quick to make a judgment that, oh my God, they're pissing in buckets and they're shut in the dark, when that's not the case either? I spoke at a school recently, and they were so misinformed about what solitary confinement is. They were so misinformed. I mean, you could have two inmates in a cell together. They could be considered solitary confinement because they're removed from GP. But they were so misinformed. And the problem with that is these are the young minds that are going to shape our future, shape the well-being of our profession. And in corrections, the well-being of our profession, that's our life. That's how we live. So these young minds that have a chance to be future leaders are already being misinformed because they're being directed only to one area, which is causing a very biased change to corrections. A change that in the long run is going to hurt everyone. It's going to hurt staff and it's going to hurt inmates. So at the end of the day, we need to inform those young minds right now why those minds are impressionable. We need to tell them the truth. We need to get out there and tell them why this is a needed tool. And there are going to be people that are going to contest it. I know that. And for those that contest it, give me the alternative and we'll look at it. Give me the alternative. But I tell you right now that the person is being removed, they're being attended to. Rehabilitation can now occur for the many that are in GP because I got the threat removed. Give me the alternative. Give me the alternative that says I have a threat in the environment who threaten staff and inmates, but I still got to rehabilitate the many. What do I do? Where do I put this individual that's problematic? And if he constantly assaults people, who am I going to put him next to? Who can I house him with? Help me out. Because the people that are making changes just seems to be so one-sided. Help us out. We're willing to embrace. We're willing to be constructive. As long as we both realize that, guys, we're on the same road here. It's a road of understanding each other's perspective, but I promise you, we all want the safe and well-being of everyone inside that facility. So we're on the same road. We have the same goal. Why can't we not just figure it out together and not isolate staff from any laws or things that you're trying to pass? Policies. How come we're not getting them involved? So again, when we're talking about solitary confinement, restrictive housing, administrative segregation, let's be open to both sides of the argument. Let's ask, why is it needed still? And let's ask, why is the inmate in there? Is the inmate being problematic? And when he's being problematic, what else is being held back? Because again, the key here is this. We have to focus on the many, not just the one. And the efforts that are being put out there to change corrections are based on the one. And it's conflicting with the well-being of the many. And when that happens, we can't guarantee safety anymore. We can't guarantee a safe and secured facility because we don't know what to do when someone acts in a manner that threatens the well-being of all those in the facility, because you've eliminated the immediate option and you have not told us anything that we can use in its stead. You want to replace something that's been working for many years with the evolution of corrections, then you need to tell us what to replace it with. Because this is our lives on the line. And you're taking away a tool from us. It's like taking away an officer's weapon. Their ability to rise that level of force so they can maintain control. Because that's why we have a use of force. But when you take away that option, we cannot maintain control. Because you're dealing with people that don't want to be controlled. And they need to be. You can even ask the other inmates. And when you eliminate the tools for us to do that, and then something goes wrong, you're going to blame us. You're going to blame us. And that's where it becomes unfair. Again, guys, the show is Tear Talk. My name is Anthony Gangi. I host the show. Follow me on the YouTube channel. Follow me on my Facebook page. It's just an objective perspective, a perspective that's not provided. It's a perspective about those that work behind the wall, risking their lives every day to protect you, the public. And that's why I do the show. And as always, guys, be safe out there. My name is Anthony Gangi. Take care and God bless.